The AK-47 is probably the most recognized rifle in the world, a weapon so deeply embedded in global culture that even people who have never held a firearm in their lives instantly recognize its silhouette, its curved magazine, and the symbolism that follows it wherever it appears, whether on battlefields, flags, propaganda posters, or the hands of people who should never have had access to such power in the first place. But the true story of how this rifle was created, and more importantly, what it ultimately did to the man who designed it, is far darker, more tragic, and more disturbing than most people could ever imagine. This is not just the story of a gun. This is the story of unintended consequences on a scale that reshaped the modern world. And it begins not with war, but with poverty, exile, and a boy who never wanted to build weapons at all. Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov was the 17th of 19 children, born to poor peasant parents in rural Russia, although only 8 of those children would survive into adulthood, a grim statistic that already tells you everything you need to know about the brutal reality of life he was born into. From the very beginning, his existence was defined by hardship, instability, and loss. And during the politically chaotic years of Stalin's Soviet Union, his family was forcibly deported to Siberia, where survival itself became a daily struggle rather than a guarantee. Despite all of this, young Mikhail did not dream of war, soldiers, or rifles. He dreamed of designing agricultural machines, of creating tools that could help ordinary people work the land more efficiently and live better lives, a goal that could not have been further removed from the legacy he would eventually leave behind. But history does not care about intentions. When the Second World War erupted and engulfed Europe, Kalashnikov was drafted into the Soviet army, and by 1941, he was already serving as a senior sergeant and tank commander, operating massive armored vehicles in a conflict where survival often depended on luck just as much as skill. That same year, during the Battle of Bryansk, his tank was struck by a German anti-tank gun, an impact so violent that it nearly killed him and left him severely wounded, removing him from the battlefield, but unknowingly placing him on a path that would change warfare forever. The future designer of the world's most infamous rifle spent the next 6 months recovering in a military hospital. It was there, while listening to Soviet soldiers complain endlessly about how unreliable and outdated their rifles were compared to the well-engineered German weapons they were facing, that Kalashnikov became obsessed with a single thought: something had to be done. He had already shown mechanical talent before the war by designing small devices and improvements for tanks, and when the army noticed this, they gave him an opportunity to work as a designer. To understand what Kalashnikov was trying to create, you first have to understand what the Germans had already figured out earlier in the war, because they had stumbled upon a concept that would redefine infantry combat. The Sturmgewehr 44, or STG 44, was the world's first truly successful assault rifle, and it represented a revolutionary shift in firearms design at a time when most armies were still clinging to outdated ideas. Before the STG-44, militaries relied on full-power rifle cartridges as their standard infantry weapons, while machine guns, submachine guns, and carbines were used to fill specific roles, creating a fragmented and inefficient system that did not reflect how combat actually happened. What the Germans realized after analyzing massive amounts of battlefield data was that most firefights occurred at distances under 300 meters, making full-power rifle cartridges capable of traveling over a kilometer not only unnecessary, but inefficient, heavy, expensive, and difficult to control in rapid fire. At the same time, submachine guns chambered in pistol calibers went too far in the opposite direction, offering high rates of fire but poor accuracy, limited range, and insufficient stopping power beyond short distances. The solution was an intermediate cartridge, a round, powerful enough to be lethal at realistic combat distances, yet light enough to allow soldiers to carry more ammunition and control automatic fire. The Germans found that sweet spot, and the STG-44 became the first true assault rifle, as we understand the concept today. The Soviets quickly took notice. Captured German weapons, ammunition, and research revealed the potential of this new approach, and Soviet engineers began developing their own intermediate cartridge, which would eventually become the 7.62 by 39mm round. However, during the chaos and resource strain of wartime production, there was little opportunity to immediately develop a completely new rifle around it, so the idea was quietly set aside, but never forgotten. After the war ended, the Soviet Union did not only seize German factories and blueprints. In 1946, during Operation Osoaviakhim, Soviet forces raided the homes of over 2,000 German scientists, engineers, and technicians in a single night, informing them that they and their families would now be relocating to the Soviet Union. Among them was Hugo Schmeisser, the designer of the STG-44 himself, who spent years working in Soviet small arms facilities before being allowed to return to Germany, where he died shortly afterward. How much influence he had on the AK-47 remains one of history's unanswered questions. Kalashnikov's final design did not copy the STG-44 mechanically, but it clearly absorbed lessons from multiple weapons, combining elements from German, American, and Soviet designs into something brutally simple and extraordinarily reliable. By intentionally designing the rifle with loose tolerances, generous clearances, a long-stroke gas piston system, and a highly tapered cartridge case, Kalashnikov created a weapon that could continue functioning when filthy, unlubricated, damaged, or neglected, exactly the conditions of real warfare. Accuracy was sacrificed slightly, but reliability became legendary, and that reliability would change the world. Mass production of the AK-47 and later the AKM flooded the globe with rifles, as the Soviet Union deliberately spread the technology to allies and developing nations as a geopolitical tool, making the AK not just a weapon, but a symbol of revolution, resistance, and raw violence. For most of his life, Mikhail Kalashnikov defended his invention, insisting that it was politicians and governments who were responsible for how weapons were used, not the engineers who designed them. But near the end of his life, something changed. In a letter written to the head of the Russian Orthodox Church shortly before his death, in the letter he wrote something along the lines of, "My spiritual pain is unbearable. If my rifle claimed people's lives, then can it be that I, a Christian and an Orthodox believer, was to blame for people's deaths?" He died in 2013 at the age of 94. A final salute was fired in his honor from AK-47 rifles.